Hi friends, today we are going to see a new topic of India. India, officially the Republic of India, is a country in South Asia. It is the seventh largest country by the area, the second most populous country, and the most populous democracy in the world. Bounded by the Indian Ocean on the south, the Arabian Sea on the southwest, and the Bay of Bengal on the southeast. It shares a land borders with the Pakistan to the west, China, Nepal and Bhutan to the north, and Bangladesh and Myanmar to the east. In the Indian Ocean, India is in the vicinity of Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Its Andaman and Nicobar Islands shares the maritime borders with Thailand, Myanmar and Indonesia. The national's capital city is New Delhi. The modern humans arrived on the Indian subcontinent from Africa no later than 55,000 years ago. Their long occupation, initially in varying forms of isolation as hunter-gatherers, has made the region highly diverse. Second only to the Africa in human genetic diversity. Settled life emerged to the subcontinent in the western margins of the Indus River basin 9,000 years ago, evolving gradually into the Indus Valley civilizations of the 3rd millennium BCE. By 12,000 BCE, an Aric, from a form of an Sanskrit and Indo-European languages, had diffused into India from the northwest. Its evidence today is found in the hymns of the Rig Veda, preserved by a revolutionary, vigilant oral tradition. The Rig Veda records the drawings of Hinduism in India. The Dravidian languages of India were supplemented into northern and western regions. By 4000 BCE, stratifications and exclusions by a caste had emerged within Hinduism, and Buddhism and Jainism has arisen, proclaiming the social orders unlikely to the hereditary. Early political consolidations gave a rise to the loose Knights of Mayura and Gupta empires based in the Ganges basin. The collective eras was suffused with a wide-ranging creativity, but also marked by the declining status of women and the incorporation of an untouchability into an organized system of belief. In South India, the Middle Kingdom exported the Dravidian languages, scripts, and religious cultures to the Kingdom of Southeast Asia. In the early medieval era, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and have become established on Indian southern and western coast. Muslim armies from the Central Asia intermittently overran an Indian northern plains, eventually found in the Delhi Sultan and the drawing northern India into the cosmopolitan networks of medieval Islam. In the 15th century, the Vijayanagara Empire created a long-lasting composite Hindu cultures in South India. In the Punjab, Sikkim emerged, rejecting the Instolization's religions. The Mughal empires in 1526 urged into 2 centuries of relative peace, leaving a legacy of luminous architecture, gradually expanding. The rule of the British East India Company followed, turning India into a colloquial economy but also consolidating its sovereignty. British Crown rule began in 1858. The right promised to India were granted slowly, but technological changes were introduced and modern ideas for the non-violent resistance and became the major fact in ending British rules. In 1947, the British Indian Empire was patrioted into two independent domains, a Hindu majority domains of India and a Muslim majority domain of Pakistan, amid a large scale loss of life and unpretended migration. India has been a federal republic since 1950, governed through a democratic parliament system. It is a multilingual and multi-ethnic society. India's populations grew from 361 millions in 1951 to 1.211 billion in 2011. During the same time, its normal per capita income increased from $64 annually to $1,498, and its literacy rate from 16.6% to 74%. From being a comparably distributed country in 1951, India has become a fast-growing major economy and a hub for information technology services. With that expanding the middle classes, it has a space program which includes several planned or complete extraterrestrial missions. Indian movies, music, and the spiritual teachings plays an increasing role in the global culture. India has substantially reduced in rate of poverty, though at the cost of increasing the economical inequality. India is an nuclear weapon state, which ranks high in a military expenditure. It has distributed over Kashmir with its neighbors Pakistan and China unresolved since the mid of 20th century. Among the socio-economic challenges, India facts are gender equality and the child malnutrition and rising levels of air population. India's land is a mega diverse for four biodiversity hotspots. Its forecast over the compromises of 2.17% of its area. India's wildlife, which has traditionally been viewed with tolerance in Indian culture, is supported among these forests and elsewhere in the productive inhabited. Entomology. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the third edition in 2009, the name India is derived from the classical Latin India, a reference to the South Asia and an uncertain region to its east, and in turn derived successively from the Greek India, the ancient Greek Indos, the old Persian Hinduism, and eastern provinces of the empire, and ultimately its cognate, the Sanskrit, the Sindhu or the river, especially the Indus River, and by the implicated it well-settled southern basin. The ancient Greeks referred to the Indians as Indoi, which translated as the people of Indus. The term Bharat, mentioned in both the Indian epic poetry and the Constitution of India, is used in its variation by many Indian languages. A modern rendering of the historical name Bharatvarsha, which applied originally to the North India. Bharat gained increased currency from the mid-19th century as a native name for India. Hinduism is a Middle Persian for India, introduced during the Mughal Empire and used widely since. Its meaning has varied, referring to a region encompassing the present-day North India and a Pakistan, or to the India in its near eternity. The history of ancient India. By 55,000 years ago, the first modern human, or the Homo sapiens, have arrived on the India subcontinent from Africa, where they have earlier evolved. The earlier known modern human remains in South Asia due to about 30,000 years ago. After 65,000 BCE, the evidence for the domestications of the food crops and the animals the constructions of the permanent structures, and the storage of agricultural surplus appeared in the Bharat and the other sites in what is now as Pakistan. These gradually developed into Indus Valley civilization, the first urban culture in South Asia, which flourished during 2500 to 1900 BCE in what is now Pakistan and Western India, centered around the cities such as Harappa, Daulari, and Kalibang, and relying on the varied forms of subsidies, the civilization engaged the robustly in the craft productions and the wide-ranging trade. During the period of 2000 to 500 BCE, many religions of the subcontinent transited from the Catholic culture to the Iron Age one. The Vedas, the old sculptures associated with the Hinduism, were composed during this period, and the historical have analyzed these two possessed a Vedic culture in the Punjab region and the upper Gangetic plain. Most historians also consider this period to have encompassed several waves of Indo-Aryan migration into the subcontinent from the northwest. The caste system, which created a hierarchy of the priest, warriors, and the free peasants, but which excluded the people by labeling their occupation impure, arose during this period. On the Deccan Plateau, archaeological evidence from this period suggested the existence of an chiefdom stage of political organization. In South India, a progression to the sedimentary life is indicated by the large number of mythologic movements dating from this period, as well as by nearby the traces of agriculture, irrigation tanks, and craft traditions. In the late Vedic period, around the 6th century BCE, the small states and the chiefdoms of the Ganges plain and the northwestern regions have consolidated into 16 major and monarchies that were known as Mahanavadas. The emerging urbanization gave rise to non-Vedic religious movements, two of which became the independent religions. Jainism came into a prominence during the life of its exemplar Mahavira. Buddhism, based on the teachings of Gautama Buddha, attracted followers from all the social classes, expected the middle class, crawling the life of Buddha and the central of the beginning of the recorded history in India. In the age of increasing the urban wealth, the kingdom of Magadha had annexed or reduced the other states to emerge as the Mayuryan Empire. The empire was one thought to have controlled most of the subcontinent except the far south. But its core region are now, though, to have been separated from the large autonomous reunionization of the militarism and a fair flung of the Buddhist Dharma. The Sangam literature of the Tamil languages reveals that between 200 BCE and 200 CE, the southern peninsula was ruled by the Cheras, the Choras, and the Pandyas, the dynasties that traded extensively with the Rome Empire and with the West and the Southeast Asia. In North India, Hinduism asserted the control within the family, leading to increase the subordination of the women. By the 4th and the 5th centuries, the Gupta Empire had created a complex system of the administration and taxation in the greater Ganges plain. These systems became a model for the later Indian kingdoms. Under the Gupta, a reunion Hinduism based on devotion rather than the management of ritual began to assert itself. This renewal was reflected in the flowering of the sculptors and architects, which formed the patterns among an urban elite. A classical Sanskrit literature flowered as well, and the Indian science, astronomy, medicine, and mathematics made the significant advisors. The medieval India. Indian early medieval ages from 600 to 1200 CE is defined by the region kingdoms and cultural diversity. When Harsha of Kanuj, who ruled much of the Indo-Gangetic plain from 606 to 647 CE, attempted to expand the southwards, he was defeated by the Chakulya ruler of the Deccan. When his successor attempted to expand the eastwards, he was defeated by Pala, the king of Bengal. When the Chakulya attempted to expand the southwards, they were defeated by the Pallavas from the farther south, who in turn were opposed by the Pandyas and the Cholas from still further south. No rule of this period was able to create an empire and consequently controls land much beyond their core region. During this time, pastoral peoples were now new non-traditional ruling classes. The caste system consequently began to show the religion differences. In the 6th and the 7th centuries, the first devotional hymns was created in the Tamil language. They were intimated all over the India and led to both the reassurance of the Hinduism and the development of all modern languages of the subcontinent. India royalty, big and small, and the temples they patronized drew the citizens in a great numbers to the capital cities, which became the economic hubs as well. The temple towns of the various sizes began to appear elsewhere as India underwent another urbanization. By the 8th and the 9th century, the effects were felt in Southeast Asia as South Indian culture and political system were exported to the lands that became the part of modern days Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Brunei, Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia and Indonesia. Indian merchants, scholars and sometimes armies were involved in these transmissions. Southeast Asian took the initiative as well, with many sojourning in the Indian seminaries and translating the Buddhist and Hindu texts into their languages. After the 10th century, Muslims, Central Asian nomadic clans, using the shift horse, cavalry and raising a vast armies united by the ethnicity and the religion, repeatedly overran the South Asian northwestern plains, lending eventually to the establishment to the Islamic Delhi Sultanate in 1206. The Sultanate was to control much of North India and to make many fauces into the South India. Although at first disruptive for the Indian elites, the Sultanate largely left its vast non-Muslims subject populations to its own laws and customs. But repeatedly repulsion of Mughal raiders in the 13th century, the Sultanate saved India from the deviation visits on West and Central Asia, settling the scene of the centuries of migrations of the feeling, soldiers, learned men, mysteries, traders, artists, and the artisans from the religions into the subcontinent, thereby creating a syncretic Indo-Islamic culture in the north. The Sultanate radiating and the weakening of the religion kingdom of South India paved the way for the indigenous Vijayanagara Empire, embarrassing a strong Savitile tradition and building upon the military technology of the Sultanate. The empire came to the control much of Peninsula India and was to influence South India society for a long afterwards. Early modern India. In the early 16th century, North India, then under mainly the Muslim rulers, fell again to the superior mobility and the firepower of a new generation of Central Asian warriors. The resulting Mughal Empire did not stamp out the local societies it came to the rule. Instead, it balanced and pacified them through a new administrative practices and diverse and inclusive the ruling elites, leading to more systematic, centralized and uniform rule. The achieving the tribal bonds and the Islamic identity, especially under Akbar, the Mughal united their far-flung realms throughout the loyalty expressed through a paternalized culture to an emperor who had near the divine status. The Mughal state economic policies derived most pieces maintained by the emperor during much of the 17th century was a factor in the Indian economic expansion, resulting in a great patronage of the paintings, literature forms, textiles and architectures. Newly coherent social groups in the northern and the western India, such as Marathas, the Rajputs and the Sikhs, gained the military and governing the ambitious during the commercial and the political elites along the coast of southern and eastern India. As the empire disintegrated, many among these elites were able to see and control their own affairs. By the early 18th century, with the lines between the commercial and the political domains being increasingly blurred, a number of European trading companies, including the English East India Company, had established a coastal outpost. The East India Company's control of the seas, greater resources, and more advanced military training and technology led into increasingly asserts its military strength and caused it to become an attractive to a portion of Indian elite. These factors were crucial in allowing the company to gain a control over the Bengal region by 1765 and sideline the other European companies. Its further accesses to the riches of the Bengal and the subsequent increased strength and the size of its army enabled it to the annexures or the subdues most of the India by 1820s. India was then no longer exporting a manufactured goods as it's long had, but was instead supplying the British Empire with the raw materials. Many historical consider this to be the onset of India's colonial period. By this time, with its economic power severely cultivated by the British Parliament and having efficiently had been made an arm of British administration, the East Indian Company became more consciously to enter the non-economic arenas, including the education, social reforms and culture. The modern India. History of the Republic of India. Historians considered India's modern age to have begun sometimes between 1848 and 1885. The appointment in 1848 of Lord Dalhousie as the Governor General of the East Indian Company set the stage for the changes essential to the modern state. These included the consolidation and the democrations of the sovereignty, the surveillance of the population and the education of the citizen. The technological changes, among them railways, canals, and the telegrams, were introduced not long after their introduction in Europe. However, the disaffection with the company also grew during this time and set off the Indian Rebellions of 1857, fed by the diverse resonance and the perceptions, including the invasive British-style social reforms, harsh land taxes, and summary treatments of some rich landowners and princes. The revelation rocked many regions of the northern and central India and showed the foundation of the company rule. Although the rebellion was suppressed by 1858, it led to the dissolution of the East Indian Company and the direct administration of the India by the British government. Proclaiming a unitary state and a gradual bit limited the British-style parliamentary system, the new rulers also protected the prince and the landlord gentry as a feudal safeguard against the future unrest. In the decades following, public life gradually emerged all over India, leading eventually to the foundation of the Indian National Congress in 1885. The rush of the technology and the commercialization of the agriculture in the second half of the 19th century was marked by the economic setbacks, and many small farmers became dependent on the whims of faraway markets. There was an increase in the number of the large-scale famines, and despite the risk of the infrastructures development brought by the Indian taxpayers, the little Indian industrial employment was generated for Indians. There were also salutary effects. The commercial cropping, especially in the newly conquered Punjab, led to the increase of food production for internal combustions. The railway network provided the critical famine relief, notably referred and reduced the cost of moving goods, and helped the nascent Indian-owned industry. After World War I, in which approximately 1 million Indians served, a new period began. It was marked by the British reformers but also a repressive legislation. By more strident India calls for self-rule and by the beginnings of the non-violent movements of the non-corporation, of which the Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi would become the leader and enduring symbol. During the 1930s, slow legislative reform was enchained by the British. The Indian National Congress won the victorious in resulting the elections. The next decade was the best with the crisis. Indian participation in the World War II, the Congress failed, final push for the non-corporation, and an surge of the Muslim nationalism. All were capped by the advent of the independence in 1947, tempered by the partition of the India into two states, India and Pakistan. Vital to the India's self-image as an independent nation was its constitutions completed in 1950, which put in place a secular and a democratic republic. Per the London Declaration, India retained its membership of the Commonwealth, becoming the first republic with it. Economic liberalization, which begins in 1990s, has created a large urban middle class, transformed India into one of the world's largest and fast-growing economies, and has increased its geopolitical plots. Indian films, music, and the spiritual teachings plays an increasing role in the global culture. Yet India is also shaped by seemingly unwinding poverty, both rural and urban, by the religious and the caste-related violence, by a Maoistic inspired Naxalite insurgencies, and by the separation in Jammu and Kashmir and in the northeast India. It has unresolved territorial dispute with China and with Pakistan. The India's sustained democratic freedom are unique among the world's newer nation. However, in spite of its recent economic success, freedom from what for a disadvantaged population remains a global yet to be achieved. Geography. Indian account for the bulk of Indian subcontinents lying atop the Indian tectonic plate and a part of Indo-Austrian plate. India's defining a geological process began 75 million years ago when the Indian plate, then the part of southern supercontinent Gondwana, began a northeastward drift caused by the sea flooring spreading to its southwest and later south and southeast. Simultaneously, the vast Theon oceanic crust to its northeast began to the subduct under the Eurasian plate. These dual processes, driven by the convection in the earth mantle, both created the Indian Ocean and caused the Indian Constitution crust eventually to underthrust the Eurasia and to uplift the Himalayas. Immediately south of emerging Himalayas, the plate movement created a vast crescent-shaped trough that rapidly filled with the river-borne sediment and now constitute the Indo-Gangetic plate. The original Indian plate made its first appearance above the sediment in the ancient Alwari range, which extended from the Delhi ridge in a southwesterly direction. To the west lies the deserts, the eastern spread of which is checked by Aravallis. The remaining of the Indian plate survives as the peninsula India, the oldest and the geological most stable part of India. It extended as far north as the Saputra and Vindhya ranges in central India. These parallel chains run from the Arabian Sea coast in Gujarat in the west to the coal-rich Chota Nagpur plate in Jharkhand in the east. To the south, the remaining peninsular landmass, the Deccan Plateau, is spangled on the west and east by the coastal ranges known as Western and Eastern Ghats. The plateau contains the country's oldest rock formation, some over 1 billion years old. The constitution the constituted in such fashion, India lies to the north of the equator between 6° 42" and 35° 30" north latitude and 68° 7" and 97° 25" east longitude. India's coastal line measures of 7,517 kilometers, that is 4,700 miles in length. Of the distance, 5,423 kilometers, that is 3,400 miles, belongs to the peninsula India, and 2,094 kilometers, that is 1,300 miles, to the Andaman, Nicobar and Lakshadweep island chains. According to the Indian Naval Hydrographic charts, the main land coastline consists of the following: 43 degrees sandy beach, 11% of the rock shore, including the cliffs, and 46% of the mudflats or the marshy stores. Major Himalayan origin rivers that substantially flow through the Indian include the Ganges and the Brahmaputra, both of which drain into the Bay of Bengal. Important tributes of the Ganges includes the Yamuna and Koshi. The latter extend The later extremely low granite, caused by the long-term slit deposition, leads to several floods and corsairs. The major peninsular river, whose steeper gradient prevents their waters from flooding, includes the Godavari, the Mahanadi, the Kaveri, and the Krishna, which also drains into the Bay of Bengal, and the Narmada and the Tapati, which drain into Arabian Sea. The coastal features includes the marshy Rann of Kutch of the western India and the alluvial sub Sundarbans deltas of eastern India. The latter is shared with Bangladesh. India, who have two archipelagos, the Lakshadweep, the coral alotes of the Indian southwestern coast, and the Andaman and Nicobar Island, a volcanic chain in the Andaman Sea. Indian climate is strongly influenced by the Himalayas and the Thar Desert, both of which drive the economically and culturally prominent summer and winter monsoon. The Himalaya prevent the cold Central Asian Kadabic winds from blowing in, keeping the bulk of Indian subcontinental warmer than the most location at similar latitudes. The Thar Desert plays a crucial role in attracting the moisture-laden southwest summer monsoon winds that between June and October provide the majority of the Indian rainfall. The four major climatic groups predominate in India: tropical wet, tropical dry, subtropical humid, and the monoton. The temperature in India has risen by 0.7 degrees Celsius, that is 1.3 Fahrenheit, between 1901 and 2018. The climate changes in India is often thought to be the cause. The retreat of the Himalayan glaciers have advisedly affected the flow rate of the major Himalayan river, including the Ganges and the Brahmaputra. According to some current projections, the number and the severity of the drought in India will have marked increased by the length of the present century. Biodiversity. The forestry in India and the wildlife of India. India is a mega diverse country, a term employed for the 17 countries which display a high biological diversity and contain many species exclusively indigenous ones or endemic to them. India is a habitat for 8.6% of all mammal species, 13.7% of bird species, 7.9% of reptile species, 6% of amphibian species, 12.2% of fish species, and 6.0% of all flowering plant species. Fully a third of an Indian plant species are endemic. India also contains 4 of the world's 34 biodiversity hotspots, or the region that display a significant habitat loss in the presence of high diminution. According to the official statistics, India forecast is 713,789 kilometers square, that is 275,595 square meter, which is 21.71% of the country's total area. It can be subdivided further into broad categories of canopy density, or the portions of the areas of forest covered by its tree canopy. A very dense forest whose canopy density is greater than 70% occupies 3.02% of Indian land area. It predominates in the tropical moist forest of Andaman Island and the Western Ghats and the Northeast India. Moderately, the dense forest whose canopy density is between 40% and 70%, occupies 9.39% of Indian land area. It predominates in the temperature configurates forest of the Himalayas, the moist deciduous sal forest for eastern India, and the dry deciduous teak forest of central and southern India. Open forest whose canopy density is between 10% and 40% occupies 9.26% of Indian land area. India had two natural zones of thorn forest, one in the Deccan Plateau immediately east of the Western Ghats and the other in the western parts of the Indo-Gangetic Plain, now turned into a rich agricultural land by the irrigation. It featured no longer visible. Among the Indian subcontinent, notable indigenous trees are the astragens indica or the neem, which is widely used in the rural Indian herbal medicine, and the lucificant Faeces ligo or the people, which is displayed on the ancient seals of Mohenjo-daro, and under which the Buddha is recorded in the Palin canon to have a sought enlightenment. Many Indian species have descended from those of Gondwana, the southern supercontinent from which India separated more than 100 million years ago. The Indian subsequent collision with the Eurasia set off a mass exchange of species. However, the volcanic and the climate exchanges later caused by the extinction of many endemic Indian forms. Still later, the mammals entered India from Asia through two geographical passes, flanking and Himalayas. This had the efforts of lowering the endemism among India's mammals, which stands at 12.6%, concentrating with 45.8% among the reptiles and 55.8% among the amphibians. Among epidemic or the vulnerable, hooded leaves monkey and the unthreatened Bedomont toad of the Western Ghats. Indian contains 172 IUCN designated threatened and animal species or 2.19 of endangered forms. These include the endangered Bengal tiger and the Ganges River dolphin. Critically endangered species include the Grigial, a crocodile, the Indian Great Indian bustard, and the Indian white-rumpered vulture, which has become nearly extincted by having infested the caverns of Diclofen's treated castle. Before they were extensively utilized for agriculture and cleared for human settlements. The thorn forests of Punjab were mingled at the intervals with the open grassland that were grazed by a large herds of bullocks preyed on by the antiseptic cheetah. The black buck, no longer extended in Punjab, is now severely endangered in India, and the cheetah is extant. The pervasiveness and the ecological deviation, the human encouragement of recent decade has critically endangered the Indian wildlife. In response, the systems of the national parks and the protected areas, first established in 1935, was expanded substantially. In 1972, India enchanted the Wildlife Protection Act and the Project Tiger to safeguard a crucial wilderness. The Forest Conservation Act was enchanted in 1980 and amended added in 1988. India's hosts were then the 500 wildlife sanctuaries and the 13 biosphere reservoirs, 4 of which are the part of the World Network of Biosphere Reservoirs. 25 wetlands are registered under the Ramsar Conventions. Political and the government. Politics. The politics of India. India is the world's most populous democracy, a parliament republic with a multi-party system. It has 8 recognized national parties, including the Indian National Congress and Bharatiya Janata Party, and more than 40 religious parties. The Congress considered the central left in Indian political culture, and the BJP the right wing. For most of the period between 1950s, when India first became a republic, and late in 1980s, the Congress held a majority in the parliament. Since then, however, it was increasingly shared the political stages with the BJP as well as with the power regional parties, which have often forced the creation of multi-party coalition government at the center. In the Republic of the India's first 3 general elections in 1951, 1957 and 1962, the Jawaharlal Nehru led the Congress on easy victorious. On the Nehru's death in 1964, Lal Bahadur Shastri briefly became a prime minister. He was succeeded after his own unexpected death in 1966 by Nehru's daughter Indira Gandhi, who went on to lead the Congress to the electoral election victories in 1967 and 1971. Following the public discontent with the state of emergency, she declared in 1975 the Congress was ordered out of power in 1977. The then new Janata Party, which has opposed the emergency, was ordered in. Its government lasted just over 2 years, voted back into the power in 1980. The Congress saw a changes in the leadership in 1984. When Indira Gandhi was assassinated, she was succeeded by her son Rajiv Gandhi, who won an easy victory in the general election later that year. The Congress was voted out again in 1989 when a national front coalition led by the newly formed Janata Dal in alliance with the left fought on the election. That government too proved the reality, short-lived, lasting just under 2 years. Elections were held again in 1991. No party owned an absolute majority. The Congress, as the largest single party, was able to form a minority government led by P.V. Narasimha Rao. The 2 years period of the political turmoil followed the general elections of 1996. Several short-lived alliances shared power at the center. The BJP formed a government briefly in 1996. It was followed by 2 comparatively long-lasting United Front coalitions, which depended on external support in 1998. The BJP was able to form a successful coalition, the National Democratic Alliance, led by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. The NDA became the first non-Congress coalition government to complete a few 5-year term. Again, the 2004 Indian general election, no party won an absolute majority. But the Congress emerged as the largest single party, forming another successful coalition. The united general election with increased numbers, and it's no longer required an external support from the India's communist parties. That year, Manmohan Singh became the first Prime Minister since Jawaharlal Nehru in 1957 and 1962 to be re-elected to a consecutive 5 years term. In the 2014 general election, the BJP became the first political party since 1984 to win a majority and the govern with the supporters of the other parties. The incumbent and the Prime Minister is Narendra Modi, of Chief Minister of Gujarat. On 22nd July 2022, Draupadi Murmu was elected India's 15th President and took the oath of office on 25th July 2022. The Government of India and the Constitution of Government. India is a federation with a parliamentary system governed under the Constitution of India. The country super legal documents it is a constitutional republic and representative democracy in which the majority rule is tempered by the minority rights protected by the law. The federalization in India defines the power of distribution between the union and the states. The Constitution of India, which came into the effects of 26 January 1950, originally the stated India to be a sovereign, democratic and republic. This characterization was amended in 1971 to the sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic and republic. India forms of government traditionally describes as quasi-federal with a strong center and a weak state. Has grown increasingly the federal since the last 1990s as a result of political, economic and the social change. The Government of India comprises the three branches. First, the executives. The President of India is the ceremonial head of the state, who is elected indirectly for a 5-year term by an electoral college comprising the members of national and the state legislators. The Prime Minister of India is the head of the government and the exercises most the executive power. Appointed by the President, Prime Minister is by the convenience supported by the party or the political alliances having a majority of the seats in the lower house of the parliament. The executives of the Indian government constitute of the President, the Vice President and the Union Council of the Ministries, with the Cabinet being its executive community, headed by the Prime Minister. Any minister holding a portfolio must be a member of one of the houses of the Parliament. In India parliamentary system, the executive is subordinate to the legislator. The Prime Minister and the Council are directly responsible to the lower house of the Parliament. The civil servants act as a permanent executives and all the decisions of the executives are implemented by them. Second, the legislators. The legislators of India is a bicameral parliament. Operating under a Westminster style parliamentary system, it comprises an upper house called the Rajya Sabha, the Council of the States, and a lower house called the Lok Sabha, the Houses of the People. The Rajya Sabha is a permanent body of 245 members who serve the strategy of 6-year term. Most of them are elected indirectly by the state and the union territorial legislatures in the number proportional to the state shares on of the national population. All but 2 of the Lok Sabha's 545 members are elected directly by the people. The people vote. They represent the single member of the constituents for the 5-year term. 2 seats of the parliament revised for Anglo-Indians in the Article 331 have been scrapped. Third, the judiciary. India has a 3-tier unitary independent judiciary comprising the Supreme Court headed by the Chief Justice of India, 25 high courts, and a large number of trial courts. The Supreme Court has an original judiciary over cases involving the fundamental rights and over disputes between the states and the centrals, and have an appellate jurisdiction over the high courts. It has the power of both strikes down union or the state laws which contravene the constitution, and individual and any government action it deems an unconstitutional. The administrative divisions. Administrative divisions of India. Political integration of India. India is a federal union comprising the 28 state and 8 union territories. All states as well as the union territories of Jammu and Kashmir, Puducherry and the national capital territories of Delhi have elected the legislatures and government following the Westminster systems of the governments. The remaining 5 union territories are directed, ruled by the central government through appointment administrators. In 1956, under the State Reorganization Act, states were reorganized on a linguistic basis. There are over a quarter of a million local government bodies at city, town, block, district and the villages. The states were: first, Andhra Pradesh; second, Arunachal Pradesh; third, Assam; fourth, Bihar; fifth, Chhattisgarh; sixth, Goa; seventh, Gujarat; eighth, Haryana; ninth, Himachal Pradesh; 10th, Jharkhand; 11th, Karnataka; 12th, Kerala; 13th, Madhya Pradesh; 14th, Maharashtra; 15th, Manipur; 16th, Meghalaya; 17th, Mizoram; 18th, Nagaland; 19th, Odisha; 20, Punjab; 21, Rajasthan; 22, Sikkim; 23, Tamil Nadu; 24, Telangana; 25, Tripura; 26, Uttar Pradesh; 27, Uttarakhand; 28 is West Bengal. The union territories as follows. First, Andaman and Nicobar Island; second, the Chhattisgarh; third, Darga and Nagar Havali and Daman and Diu. D. Fourth, Jammu and Kashmir; fifth, Ladakh; sixth, Lakshadweep; seventh, National Capital Territory of Delhi; eighth, Puducherry. The foreign, economic and the strategic relation. Foreign relations on India and Indian armed forces. In 1950, India strongly supported the decolonization in Africa and Asia and played a leading role in the non-aligned movement. After initially cordial relation with neighboring China, India went to the war with China in 1962 and was widely though to have been humiliated. India has had a tense relationship with the neighboring Pakistan. The two nations have gone to the war 4 times in 1947, 1965, 1971 and 1999. 3 of these wars were fought over the disputed territory of Kashmir, while the 4th, the 1971 war, followed from the Indian support for the independence of Bangladesh. In the late 1980s, the Indian military twice intervened abroad at the invitations of the host country. A peacekeeping operations in Sri Lanka between 1987 and 1990, and an armed between intervention to prevent a 1988 COP detail attempt in the Maldives. After the 1965 war with Pakistan, India began to pursue the close military and economic ties with the Sovereignty Union. By the late 1960s, the Soviet Union was in the largest arms suppliers. Aside from ongoing its special relationship with Russia, India had a wide-ranging defense relation with Israel and the France. In the recent years, it has played the key roles in the South Asian Association for the Religion Cooperation and the World Trade Organization. The national had provided 10,000 1 lakh million military and police personnel to serve in 35 UN peacekeeping operations across the four continents. In practices in the East Asia Summit, the G8 and the other ministerial forums, India has close economic ties with the countries in South America, Asia and Africa. It pursues a look east policy that seeks to strengthen partnership with ASEAN nations, Japan and South Korea that revolve around many issues but especially those involving economic investment and region security. The China's nuclear test of 1964 as well as its repeated the threat to intervene in support of the Pakistan in the 1965 war convinced India to develop nuclear weapon. India conducted its first nuclear weapon in 1974 and carried out an additional undergoing testing in 1998. Despite the criticism and military sanction, India has signed neither the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty nor the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Territory, considering both to be false and discriminatory. Thank you.